start on the record button, but here we go. So I see a picture right now. Is this you guys who are here with me, or who's part of this call and who's not from the picture? Just so I can kind of put a name to a face.
So that picture, and I want to say something about the picture. It makes us look a lot angrier than we actually are. We're very goofy people, so we don't take ourselves seriously at all, and that seems to be the picture that kind of everybody sees. But so that's me on the front left of the picture. My name's Kurtis Parks, and then in the middle is Dan Rivera, and he's with us today.
Hey, Dan.
Hey. And then Chris Douglas is on the front right, and he's also with us.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Hi, Chris. All right.
And then in that second row, we actually have Joel Buckner, who's not with us. Joel is actually leading a trip. We do 33 missions trips this year, and it's really close to the heart of our church mission is. And so Joel is actually, he's in South Africa right now leading a mission trip. And then Carolina is... she's our angel voice, and she's over on the West Coast, actually. Right now she's in Seattle, so she's visiting some family and friends this week.
Okay, so we've got three of you here. We've got Kurtis, Dan, and Chris. Is that right?
Yeah, you can call us the triple threat, if you will.
Okay. You guys really don't take yourself seriously. Yeah, because that is a very serious picture. Was he telling you, like, to put your frown face on there? I mean, Dan, I see a little bit of a smirk coming out of you there, but Kurtis, you hold it down pretty good. So.
Yeah. Dan's trying really hard because he literally 99% of the time has a smile on his face. Yeah. But our photographer said, make a look that's going to scare the devil. So that's kind of what we're doing right there.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kurtis, you almost look like a mobster in that shot there. So I hope that's not, offensive to you. But it doesn't sound like you're that kind of guy. So that's
there you go.
Awesome. Well, I am Ryan. We do lots of these. We love to talk to people all over the nation from different churches, worship leaders, and worship teams. I'm super glad to have you guys with us. We really love to try and encourage the church in all different aspects connected with the worship ministry. And as you guys know, we've got lots of, sheet music and charts and orchestrations and tracks and all that kind of stuff. People come multiple times every week from various churches to resource their teams. And then we like to do these webinars just as kind of a free thing to, put that human touch on what we do as Praise Charts. And I started this whole, I guess you could call it business or publishing company about 17 years ago as a worship pastor, and I still kind of carry that heart. And now I'm part of the Worship Leaders Network at our current church. And something kind of cool I wanted to tell you, Kurtis and Dan and Chris, is that tomorrow I'm heading off on our first songwriters retreat for our church. There's 13 of us going to hole ourselves up into a cabin, and they're all worship leaders of a church of about 4,000 or 5,000 people, and we're just gonna seek the Lord and build relationships together, and hopefully write some songs and capture a vision, and just think about how are we going to serve this. The church is actually only about 4 or 5 years old, so it's had like explosive growth, which is, not super common in Canada to have a church like that, but it's an exciting place to be. So I just want to say I am totally like, I'm here to learn. I mean, I got questions, and I will field lots of questions from other people, but I'm sort of talking to you guys as somebody who's, in the thick of it and going, tell us, how do you guys make your way through thriving ministry like this? And so yeah, I'm excited. After this, I've got a few meetings left today. Then I'm packing my bags, and we're heading out for a 6-hour drive to a lake in the middle of British Columbia, and we'll be there for 5 days. So looking forward to that.
You're making me jealous, man.
I know. But I just wanted you to know that you're talking to not just me. I'm sure many people who are listening in are feeling like, they're looking for ways to encourage their worship teams to build and expand some are dealing with the challenges, I'm sure, of campuses around and the feeling of being disconnected and yet trying to stay connected. So all of that's great. I mean, there are so many places where we can start, but why don't you guys start by just giving us a little quick overview of who you are, who is NCC Worship. Tell us a little bit about your church and your pastor, and a bit of the culture that you guys have been developing over the last. I think you guys are going for about 20 years now, aren't you?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. We're actually going into our 20th year of ministry as a church. Pastor Mark actually, for the first time during all those years of pastoring, he's taken an extended sabbatical right now. So he's kind of taken a summer to kind of breathe and regroup and revitalize. So that's pretty exciting for him. And it's so cool to just see, as a lead pastor, the trust that he has in his staff, really, to leave the church in his staff's hands over the summer. But he's the first guy to say it. You know, he says all the time, like, I'm the lead under shepherd of National Community Church. Jesus is pastoring this thing, and that's kind of at the heart, really, of our church. Is just, you know, we have this thing we say all the time. We're really big on connecting with other worship pastors and other pastors in the area, and we love to build bridges and not burn them. And so one of the things that we say is, hey, it's about the name preached inside the church, not the name above the church door, right? And so that's just a really cool thing. That's kind of where our church is at right now, really focused on unity and just being a huge bridge to other churches in the D.C. area. But a little bit about NCC, National Community Church. We are a multi-site church located in the D.C. and greater D.C. area, so Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland. We've got a lot of people that come from even up to Baltimore area. People come. We've got 7 campuses right now, 4 of those in Northern Virginia, and 3 of those are in D.C. proper. So we have one campus that is literally right behind our office where we're talking today. It's called Barracks Row, where Chris leads worship there. We've got a campus that meets in the historic Lincoln Theater, which is in U Street on D.C., and that's where I usually lead worship, or Joel leads worship if I'm not there. We have a campus in Georgetown, which is one of the coolest areas of D.C., awesome restaurants and shopping, and a lot of cool history there. And Dan, who's also with us today, he leads worship there. And then our 4 Virginia campuses are Potomac Yard, Gainesville, and Ballston, and those all meet in movie theaters, as well as Georgetown meets in a movie theater. So our website as a church is actually theaterchurch.com. NCC kind of got on the ground floor of meeting in movie theaters, because it's like, hey, Sunday morning, who's going to see a movie at 10 a.m.?
Exactly.
It's a really cool thing to be. Our church, one of our core values is to be a church that meets in the marketplace, which is just where culture happens, right? And so America, you know, is known as a nation that really thrives on the entertainment industry. So as the church, I mean, I think we kind of run to that, and we're like, you know what? Let's meet where people go to naturally. And we also have a coffee house on Capitol Hill. It's called Ebenezer's. And we call our coffee houses modern-day wells, you know, because it's like the gathering places of today's era. And you look at Jesus, and a lot of his ministry took place around the wells. I mean, you know the story of the Samaritan woman. You know, a lot of really Bible happens around the wells. You even go back to like the time of Abraham and Moses. And so today we get a chance to really see culture happen whenever we walk into our coffee house. There's people that are working on Capitol Hill. There's people in politics, people in government, people in military, people that work at nonprofits. And that's D.C. in a nutshell. You've got so many different walks.
I was browsing through your website this morning and looking at some images, and I was really kind of captivated by actually some of the buildings that you guys have infiltrated. You know, for sure the movie theaters and some old historic classic buildings, and then this Ebenezer's. I mean, that's an old, more than 100-year-old building that you guys have totally transformed, haven't you?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of wild. When we bought the building 10 or so years ago, it was actually a crack house. It was a dilapidated old building, and it's just kind of a cool story of redemption, you know, going from a crack house to a coffee house. That's kind of, I mean, not to get too, like, spiritual on it, but, like, that's kind of like the gospel story, right? That's what Jesus came to do, is to take old things and make them new, to take run-down things and breathe life into them. And so as a ministry, whether we're going into a movie theater or into a crack house and turning it into a coffee house, that's one of our core convictions, is just to bring life wherever we go. And so,
really good.
Yeah, and our pastor, our lead pastor is Mark Batterson, who's also an author and has written some really key influential books like The Circle Maker, Wild Goose Chase, and his latest book is A Trip Around the Sun, and that's actually the series we're in right now. And so, kind of a cool story. When I first came to NCC, it was as a guest worship leader, and this is 6 years ago. And I actually had just read the book In a Pit with a Lion on a snowy day, and that book really spoke to my life, and it just kind of changed the trajectory of how I thought about ministry. And so when I came as a guest, I got a chance to sit down with Pastor Mark and just pick his brain and hear his heart, and I just knew from that conversation this was a church that I wanted to be a part of. And so I've been here as a worship leader on staff since March of 2010. And yeah, it's just been an amazing ride to go from, when I first came, we were at 4 campuses. Now we're at 7 and already looking at our 8th launch right now. And God's just doing amazing things. I mean, we say Holy Spirit plus coffee equals ministry around here. So
yeah, right. Hey, Kurtis, let's hear a little bit from Dan and Chris. Maybe they could share a bit about how they came to connect with you at NCC, just a little background on, because you've got a circle of guys there. So, Dan, why don't you maybe share a little bit about how did you connect with Kurtis and the team at NCC, and what's your role and passion there at the church?
I met Pastor Mark while I was leading worship for the university I was at, in Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida. And I actually led worship with a friend of mine named Darnell, who I think is listening right now. So, Darnell, what's up?
I saw his name. Hey, shout out to Darnell. Yep, he's there. So
that's how I met Pastor Mark, and then I ended up connecting with Kurtis while he was in Florida, I think doing like AG General Counsel. And there was just a really natural kind of connection with the songs I was writing at Southeastern, kind of connecting them with Kurtis and doing all that. And then, that's kind of how that ended up happening.
Right on.
So I came up about a year and some change ago.
I was watching you leading worship this morning on the video and just really appreciated your heart and the way you kind of just led and presented. You were singing the You Alone song. I guess that's the cover song. And so, yeah, great work on that. You have I could tell that you'd be, it'd be a privilege to sit under you and follow you if you are leading and singing and things like that. So that was really great.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Chris, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your backstory coming into this world in the capital city.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really the only native Northern Virginian DC guy on our team here. I actually grew up in the Anglican/Episcopal church, and I was on staff at another church. I came on staff there when Kurtis came to NCC, so we kind of got on ministry staff around the same time, and we shot a couple of emails back and forth but never really connected. And about a year and a half later, we had a mutual friend who introduced us, and we actually sat down at the Ebenezer's Coffee House, and we just had a real heart connection. I was kind of at a crossroads in my life and my journey, and Kurtis is a fantastic producer, so we actually did a record together back in, what was that, Kurtis, 2011 maybe?
2011, yep.
Yeah. So, and over the course of the next 9 months, the Lord released me kind of from where I was at, the church I was at, and I transitioned on staff at NCC. So that was about 3.5 years ago. And I'm kind of the utility guy around here. I wear a bunch of different hats, lead a lot of different. I'm wearing a beanie right now, so I'm a big fan of hats.
He'll be in a cowboy hat by 5 o'clock. You never know.
Okay.
Got the hat collection here. I oversee our worship kind of in the family ministry realm. I lead every weekend with our youth group, and then I'm at our Barracks Row location. So I just kind of wear a bunch of different worship hats here in the multi-site world at NCC.
Yeah, awesome to have you. Well, I can remember I came to know about you guys probably first when I was hearing about this Christmas album you put out, and I don't know if that was your second or third or first whatever album, but you were known under the name 714, which comes after 2 Chronicles 7:14. So anyways, that there was a few Christmas arrangements that you had that were really taken off in praise charts, and we were like, who are these people? And so this is great to have this album as a follow up here, and so now we just kind of want to get a little taste of the flavor of when a church is thriving and growing, and you want to immerse yourself in a city, and then you're in the capital city. This is some people would call it like the power center of the world. So much influence comes out of Washington, D.C., and you guys are right, like, embedded into it. I love even the fact that it's not so much that you have your own separate church building. You've kind of taken over buildings and theaters and coffee shops and crack houses and whatever it is. You're kind of growing up from the inside. And so it's a really cool vision. And another thing I just am really capturing is you guys are a real visionary church. We're telling me about 36 or something mission. You said you're out on missions 36 weeks a year or 36 teams, or what was that number you gave me?
Yeah, we're taking 33 trips this year, so that's both domestic and global trips. It's just mission.
I was just reading your vision statement, as a church, that you guys see yourself one day that every week of the year somebody's going to be out in missions. And I was just thinking to myself, you guys are on that track. You see the vision and you're going for it. So we're ripe and eager to listen and have you guys encourage us down this journey. So tell us about, the overarching theme that we want to talk about in addition to some of the songs you've been writing and singing is thriving in a kind of a multi-campus style model where not everybody is, all together in the same service. It's not even just different services of the same building. Now it's different places. And you got, so there's kind of a fragmentation potential. And lots of churches are wondering how do you maintain community, or do you even need to? That's the question is, do we all need to, know each other, or can we just let groups kind of cluster in different areas of the city and let that be, multiple churches? So I don't know really where to start, but why don't you just kind of walk us into how you made this such a focal sort of vision for how your church was going to grow and how you guys have been dealing with that a little bit. So give us a little intro into this, Kurtis. Your thoughts behind that. Yeah.
That's a great question. And that's the really unique thing about churches today is I'm running into a lot more churches that are doing the multi-campus thing. Even when I first came to NCC 5 years ago, I knew very little about multi-site. I had been a part of a church in Nashville where I'm from, and we had just launched a campus, but it ended up we kind of re-ingested that back into the main campus because it didn't work. So if I knew anything about multi-site, it was how to not do things. So let me kind of that'll be kind of the foundation. The only way that I know what to do is first by making mistakes and learning what not to do. But, the cool thing about the church is there's not one right way to do it, right? I think when it says in John 4:24, like, God is looking for those who will worship him in spirit and in truth, that has to do with are unique blueprints. Each and every one of us are made uniquely. We each have different purposes. We each have different passions and visions, and God's placed those in us. So if there was one right way to do church, we'd probably have one church. But you know what? The way that God speaks is very personal, and he does an amazing work through his Holy Spirit in that way. So I just want to say every multi-site is different, and what we do at NCC works here. So hopefully some of the things I'm going to share could be a help to those who are walking in multi-site ministry. And you know, you talked a lot about vision, because that's one of those things that we seem to be bursting with. It's just vision, and it's really what drives every decision that we make here. You know, you read in Proverbs, I think it's 29, that where there is no vision, the people perish. So the flip side of that is where there is vision, people find life, right? And so I think when you can have vision and communicate it effectively, you're going to have a life-giving and a life-building church. And a lot of that just comes from sitting under Pastor Mark. He's a lead pastor that never runs short of vision. And, you know, for better or for worse, I feel like once we hit a milestone, we're already thinking about the next 2 milestones down the road. And so there's never a dull moment here, which can definitely be exhausting if you're not finding refreshing and finding life in God's presence outside of when you're at work. So that's a side nugget. But, you know, everything that we do as a worship team stems from that larger vision of NCC. And I just kind of want to get into vision really quick, because when you have a multi-site church and you have multiple campuses meeting, vision is that one thing that can really be the lifeblood that goes in between all of those campuses, that unifies, hey, why are we doing this? What do we do, and how do we do it? When you have vision, you can set it, you can learn it, and you live it. And all of those different campuses have kind of like that foundational piece that they can build off of. But if you don't have vision, you don't have that foundation. So,
you know,
really
if
quick,
I could just interject here quickly, because I love the focus on vision. And I'll tell you something I liked about the vision. When I was reading your vision of your church on your site there, and it was, you were actually envisioning what your church world was going to look like, you know, sometime in the future. It wasn't like a mission statement of this is why we're doing what we're doing, but this is what we're going to look like. We're going to be 52 weeks a year. We're going to have mission teams, you know, out around the world, and that's not what you're doing right now, but it's where you're going to end up, right? Where you're heading towards, and you guys are on that road. So I just like that definition of vision is like, can you see it? Can you see what you can be like in the future, and then aim towards that. So it's good.
That's it, man. Yeah, I mean, even if you think about the very like rudimentary meaning of the word vision, it is what you see, and you can only have influence on what's in front of you, right? Like, we can't change our past, and so vision has to be something that really drives where you're heading. And so obviously where you've been kind of launches that. And so really it's been a kind of an interesting past year and a half for us. We just released our album You Alone, and that was through Integrity Music. But Integrity probably approached us close to a year ago with the idea of doing a partnership with us and kind of being an amplifier to the sound that was happening here in Washington, D.C. At National Community Church. And so when that initial meeting happened where it was like, hey, we want to kind of partner with you guys, it really forced us to take a look at, okay, if we have an opportunity to share with people like we're doing today on Praise Charts with this webinar, if we have an opportunity to share with people about what God's doing here, we need to put what we're doing here under the microscope and really challenge ourselves like, hey, what is our vision, and what are our values? What's our mission? What drives us? What gets us up in the morning? And so we've been doing that over the last year. We call it our MVV. It's our mission, vision, and values. And so our mission, you know, obviously a mission, it kind of tells who you are and what you do. So at the core, NCC Music is a music collective based in Washington, D.C. at National Community Church. And then through creativity and excellence, we want to cultivate atmospheres of intimate worship and passionate praise where God's presence and his people connect. And then it's our hope that the world would be transformed one life at a time through an encounter with Jesus. And then it's our heart to equip the church to see that happen. So that right there that's our mission statement, right? And it's on our website, it's on our Facebook page. A lot of us have a piece of that even in our email signatures. My dad said something. My dad was a pastor for 10 years, and he said this really cool thing that repetition is the key to learning. And so vision without consistency can very quickly be forgotten, right? So the reason that we always talk about that is because on average it takes a person 3 times hearing something before they can remember it. And so how many more times do we need to be just talking about vision over and over again so that it really gets into the hearts of our leaders and our people? So that was our mission statement. Our vision needs to be kind of like that one sentence, that one phrase that anybody can recite off the top of their head. So if you were to boil down what at the end of the day does NCC worship want to see happen, what do we exist for, that's our vision. And it's simply this: global revival through personal worship. And that's on our website, that's on our album cover, that's on everything. It's like that is, if you were to ask any of our worship team members, I would put money that a lot of them could recite that: global revival through personal worship. That is our heart. And so really, knowing what your mission, vision, and values are will help drive every decision in the multi-site thing. And the last piece of that is our values. And this is something really cool that we've been working on because it actually spells out an acronym. It spells out the word SAUCE. So when I was in Nashville, every time we played a show, musicians kind of have this thing they say to each other. It's like, man, you better bring the sauce. That means you better bring your A game. You better bring the sauce. If a drummer was laying down a nasty beat, we're like, oh man, he's bringing that sauce. So it's just kind of one of those things, and it just so happened to be, and I'm not kidding, this is all the Holy Spirit how this happened, but it happened to spell out really what our values are. So if you take the word sauce and you break it down, it's service, authenticity, unity, creativity, and excellence. And those are
Beautiful.
The core values of our worship team. And I think, honestly, any church can kind of take those, adapt them to whatever your culture is, because at the end of the day, every worship leader should have these values as a part of who they are. And, we could break down each and every one of those. One of the cool things that actually today, Integrity through weareworship.com released what we call the Sauce Cookbook, and it kind of dives into those 5 guiding values that we have. So you can check that out there, or you can see more about that on our nccworship.net website too.
Well, I'm hearing it sounds like it's a great place to start, because when you're talking about the multi-campus concept, the physicality of it is that people are fragmented and they're in different places doing different things. But you're talking about you have to start with that unifying vision and values and purpose, and then that decentralization, you might call it, doesn't feel so intimidating. And so so could you kind of walk me into what are some of the challenges then that you guys face, or you think some people listening in are facing? Like, why are some churches that try this, why do they fail? What are the pressures that are trying to break a church apart when they're trying to go into this model? What are those issues that they're dealing with?
Yeah, a lot of the questions that we get about multi-site have to do with this thing that we call DNA versus autonomy.
Okay.
The DNA of a church, just like it is in our bodies, like the DNA is our makeup. That's kind of like the core. You see that helix in whatever that class was that we took, and I can't even remember, it was so long ago. But DNA is that's our core makeup. That's what makes us who we are. But then autonomy is like, okay, like this is kind of like where you can take it and run. And so the battle between DNA and autonomy, I think, is one of the biggest killers of a multi-site church, is because you don't figure out how those things really aren't in a battle with one another. They actually help each other out. It's not. I don't like to call it DNA versus autonomy. I like to call it DNA with autonomy. And so I think it's just figuring out what are those key pieces. So for NCC, it's like, what are those key things about National Community Church, those identifiers where you can walk into any one of our campuses and be like, yeah, this is NCC, this is National Community Church. But then how do we celebrate the uniqueness of each community and the uniqueness of each different campus? Because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, right? And I think that's kind of what makes us a little bit different than other multi-sites, because just chatting with other, multi-site worship directors, some multi-sites, it's like, hey, we all play the same set of music on a Sunday morning. We're all doing the same 4 songs, and this is how we do it. We do all the songs up front, or we do 2 up front and 2 to close. This is our song bank. We all choose from this, or, we're all doing, we're all going to do these different artists' music. And we all have to have an electric guitar, acoustic, drums, and bass. That's our bands. That's kind of where NCC is a little different. What we do is we have those pieces that will unite us, and you'll know, like, okay, this is NCC. We typically do 3 songs up front and then 1 song to close. And out of those 4 songs, only that closing song is the same across all of our campuses. And that's because it's actually the response song to the message. It actually plays into whatever the theme of the message was that morning. We want to send all of our campuses out singing that song because, Ryan, think about how many sermons across the years do you remember in your life? I could probably count them on one hand, how many messages I remember. But then how many songs do I remember being a massive influence in my life across, my 33 years? I couldn't keep them in this room that I'm in. I mean, there's just hundreds. And so I know that if you can send somebody out singing essentially the message that they just heard, they're going to catch it a lot quicker.
Right.
And so we love, and that's even in our songwriting, we love to put the message to melody. We like to put the word to worship. And we want to give our congregation the Word of God as a song. And so that closing song is really the only one that we all do together as a campus. We'll all close with the same song. But those 3 upfront songs, those are kind of like free-for-all. Whatever your campus, whatever you guys are really just latching onto. So, like Chris here at our Barracks Row campus, their upfront set is going to look a lot different than Dan's set over at Georgetown. It's going to look a lot different than my set at Lincoln Theater or Lena's set over at Potomac Yard, because they're different and unique communities. Here in Barracks Row, Chris could tell you better than I could that, it's mostly young, people working on the Hill, staffers, lobbyists, people working at World Vision, IJM, and really young families. We're at Georgetown, because it's a university, it's so close to that, you're going to have students, college kids, you're going to have professors, young and marrieds, all in between. If you go out to Gainesville and Kingstown, those are our more suburban campuses, it's all families. So, maybe on Barracks Road, they're really latching onto like Hillsong Young and Free, but if you did that at a Kingstown, where it's like a middle-aged, dad and mom worshiping, I don't know if they're going to really latch onto that. But if you did a Matt Redman tune there, it might go over way stronger than if you did, a more gospel Israel Houghton, kind of driven tune like we would do at Lincoln Theater. So it's kind of like those. You want to celebrate the uniqueness of every community, but you also want to bring us all together, and that's really a huge key to a successful multi-site campus, I think.
I hear you.
Does that make sense?
I love the combination, DNA and autonomy, or with autonomy, you said.
Yeah.
And that's a careful, there's tension in that balance, but that's the thing to pursue. I love that model, and allowing each church to be unique and yet carry that core, vision and DNA of your churches. I have a few questions coming in from some others, but before I get to those, I just want to ask, just to hear a little from Dan and Chris. Again, my question for you guys is, if you're worship leaders in some of these other campuses, what are you looking for from Kurtis as your sort of lead worship pastor? What is it that he is giving you that's helping you do your ministry most effectively in your various campuses? Can you give me a few thoughts as to what you're looking for?
Yeah, this is Dan.
Yep.
I think something that we've started saying more is that you can't have excellence without evaluation. So the thing that I'll always come back to and just ask Kurtis if he's doing a worship set with me, or I'm kind of bouncing off like maybe a recording from Georgetown, is, hey, does this match your heart? And just, does this sound like NCC worship? Does this sound, or me doing these set of songs match or how you want to do it? So a lot of it has to do with constantly being in communication. And I think if you asked all of us here, communication is probably one of the biggest pieces for the multi-site thing. Just being able, keeping that clear line of communication, saying this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, and keeping that going for sure.
Yeah,
that's
and
really good.
To chime in on that, I think the biggest thing that we do as a staff team, coming together after a weekend of services around, the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, is the first thing we do is reevaluate what we just did over the weekend. We talk through, hey, what was the success of our, of the worship set, and what was something that was challenging? Where's a way to improve upon? So we're evaluating in community, and I think that's a really a key piece to just kind of keeping it all together, keeping the locations kind of on the same page, but also celebrating that that autonomy, that individuality that you see.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Hey, do you mind if I field a few questions that people are asking?
Absolutely, man.
From the hip here. So, because people want to know some of the nitty-gritty, details of how you make this work. So the first one they're saying is, how do you surface talent for worship teams at a new site? If you're looking to build a new site, where are the musicians all coming from?
Yeah, it's interesting. Every time we launch a new campus, we're doing just that. We're launching out of our pre-existing campuses. And so I can kind of say this from a unique perspective. I actually was a campus pastor for 3 years of one of our campuses, and that's really where God developed in me a pastor's heart, but also I hit so many challenges and growth opportunities through that I think now shape kind of how I think of things as a worship director. But how do we field talent? That's a great question. We actually do 3 auditions a year. We do one kind of in the spring kickoff, one through the summer, and then to close out the year at the end of the fall. And we do those at one location, but we invite all campuses who, like auditionees, like everybody would come in. And that way, what we can do is we can set up our campuses for success by having a core group of worship leaders, mostly staff, kind of help filter in some of those people that are ready to fully play in services. And, I'm not going to send, like, our worship leader out in Kingstown, I'm not going to send them somebody that I don't fully believe is going to really just bring the sauce, right, for lack of a better word, but, bring it on a weekend. And so by having kind of a quality-controlled audition 3 times a year, we used to do them just as they came, and I felt like we got to a place where every week we were staying well after hours, and it just really dug into our family time. And so we said, hey, 3 times a year we're going to do, and it's almost, for lack of a better word, a cattle call, kind of how we do them, and we just bring them in, and we give them 2 songs to learn, and then we'll throw them a curveball if they've aced those 2 songs, and people either come really ready or they come and just completely flub it, and then we give them another chance to kind of redeem themselves in a couple months. And that's the thing, going back to where Dan talks about evaluation has to happen for excellence. I would never turn down somebody that auditions and just say, hey, you're not good enough, good luck. We always give them feedback and just say, hey, when you were playing the drums, we noticed you were struggling a little bit with the click, and then there was way too many fills. How about you just simplify and really practice with the click track, So we want to give people, kind of those tips to really hone in on their craft. But doing that quality-controlled environment of auditions is going to set up each and every one of our campuses for success. And we do our auditions in 3 phases. The first phase is you come and you audition, and if you make it past that, your second phase is to plug in with that campus band for a rehearsal. And that's for 2 reasons. One, to kind of get the lay of the land with the band that you're going to be playing with every week or every other week. And then 2, to kind of figure out the avions and the monitor systems if you've never played, with a live drummer. It's to figure all that stuff out. And then phase 3 is to play at a live service. And once you've made it through all those phases, now you are officially part of the worship team. And so that's a really big thing for auditions, to make those really successful. And even that, you really want to make sure that people understand that you need an audition. I think I came from a church where it's like, hey, if anybody has a heart to serve, you're on the worship team. And that just goes back to what your main vision as a church is. One of our core values is excellence, and I don't think you can achieve that if just anybody's allowed on stage, because that stage, we do hold that as that's a place that we really want to bring honor and respect to. And think about this, man. The only people that are on a stage really are your pastors and your worship leaders with their teams, right? Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of people walking into a church, whether it's their 30th year of walking with Jesus or it's their very first experience in a church, worship teams, usually if they're the ones that are kicking off a service, which most of the churches that I've been to, that's what happens, worship is the very first impression of Jesus that people will get. So you want to make sure that we're giving people a great glimpse of who Jesus is. We want to make sure that we're inviting people in. And we just want that to be awesome and excellent, because that's Jesus, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that you guys have answered it so well. There's really doesn't sound like there's any way to get around the whole audition thing. Somehow you got to give people feedback as to their readiness for playing. And I must say, I'm sure anybody that's been through an audition, it can be a kind of an intimidating thing. To play in front of 1 or 2 people. I mean, at our church, they even had video cameras set up and everything, and it's like, you're coming in front of The Voice, or, these people are going to, proclaim your destiny on you. So somehow as a pastor, you want to redeem that moment for them and give them some encouragement, some feedback, and help make them better. So,
and good. And knowing that it's very intimidating, because it really is, we really are intentional about making that mood very light. Dan is usually one of the first guys that welcomes people in, and he just has a great, just how you can just kind of cut the air with just kindness. You cut it with a welcoming spirit. And when Chris and I are usually heading up the band, we're back in the audition room. And people come in one by one, and we just, as soon as they walk in, we're like, "What's up? Hey," whatever their name is. Like if it's you, we're like Ryan. Hey, our dog. What up, dog? We totally cut all of the nervousness, and we want to make it a party for when people come, because I know that can be really intimidating, and we are not wanting that to be a stressful situation. We want it to be a fun thing and very inviting. So yeah.
Really good.
I want to make a point too, if I can, really quick about this, asking how we get some of these other campuses up and running, if they're a newer campus or maybe a campus that has maybe less talent as far as the worship people. Our worship audition is collective, so everybody comes in from all different campuses to audition at one place. What that allows us to do as worship leaders and say, okay, this one individual came and played bass, isn't the best bass player we have across campuses for this one audition, but the place they're auditioning for has a lot of bass players. Let's talk to them about potentially wanting to play at a different location. So, and then we filled it in like there's not a whole lot of space to serve here right now. You would have less opportunity, but would you be interested in going to a campus where that is the option? And a lot of times that helps in filling up those gaps. So just to kind of come back to that.
It's really good.
And Ryan, I think one of the biggest things that we hear about, especially talking about with teams and auditions and filling slots on teams, is how do you guys maintain a full roster across each campus? And I think, Kurtis, if I'm right, we have about 110 volunteers on our worship team.
With choir.
Yeah, with choir we have more than that across all 7 locations. But I think the truth is you never really outgrow like this need for more people. It's everyone's like, well, how do you recruit? How do you get more people on? And with a church like ours, with a vision like ours, we're always looking to add more campuses. It's that tension, it's that struggle that we're always gonna kind of be living in. And so, like what Kurtis was saying, I think you make do with the best that you have, and you bring that sound of excellence, whether it's 2 electric guitars, synths, and drums, or if it's an acoustic guitar player and a piano. You make the most out of the sound that you have for that week. And one of the things that we talk a lot about here is sometimes, we have to show our holes, hey, we don't have a bass player right now, and we have a need for bassists. So you don't say, hey, well, we're gonna put a really bad set together or a really bad sound, because that's just not what we do. But we want to show people that, hey, like we're lacking in bass players here, and we need you. So we're always kind of constantly out there within the congregation, like searching for talent, searching for people who play, and then getting them out. So I don't really think you ever outgrow the need for more musicians. And
just don't be afraid to show those gaps.
Right. Yeah.
Good stuff. I have a follow-up question myself. Now I want to talk a little bit about the actual worship services spread around different campuses. And just to prelude my question, is it safe to assume that the services have a video-based message, or is there a live preacher in all these campuses?
Each one of our campuses has a campus pastor, so those are the guys that shepherd that congregation. And then on a Sunday morning, they're definitely facilitating the service. They also preach 6 to 8 times a year. So those are the guys that know that campus better than anybody else. We do mostly have video, so like our Saturday night service, we'll film the message, and then Sunday morning that gets spread out to the different campuses, and so we're all showing video. But then whoever's preaching live that weekend will usually preach 2 different campuses that Sunday morning. So Barracks Row, and then they'll travel to another campus. But yeah, it is majority video. Yep.
Yeah. So the question that I just wanted to ask is, what are your strategies for keeping every campus feeling like they're being pastored by real people, and that this is, I'm not just kind of coming to a movie. Here I am coming to a movie theater, and now we're just going to watch church as a movie. So that is a challenge that I think churches face, even theologically. They're grappling with. People need to be pastored by real people. I need to be known by my pastor. He needs to know what my issues are so he can speak to me. So tell us how you keep that personal touch very real, spread across your campuses with video and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, campus pastor is a huge part of that. I mean, collectively, if you put all of our campuses together, it's close to 5,000 people. But across 7 campuses, each campus has maybe 250 to 350 people generally. especially our theaters. So you think about that, like if I was to walk into a church and 5,000 people are meeting, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel overstimulated, super intimidated. I'm not going to be able to find connection because it's just way too much. But when you walk into a community of 250 to 300 people, you're like, man, I see this guy every week. What's your name? You know, and you build relationships and you can build community that way. So campus pastors being able to really shepherd those groups of people, that's your face-to-face interaction. And then as worship pastors, and I do consider, you know, guys like Chris and Dan, Joel and Lena, you know, worship pastors because we are shepherding people. You have the opportunity not only to shepherd your worship teams, but if you're leading worship at a campus on a Sunday, that time that God has given you is to shepherd that congregation in worship. And if you look at anything from our mission and our vision, our website, all of our songs, we center around one big thing, and that's the presence of God. And so, you know, Chris was talking about how we have evaluation. A successful weekend, in my eyes, and I think in all of our eyes, is that if we led people to God's presence and there was an encounter with Jesus that weekend, boom, that's a success. Because the last thing that the church needs is another great speaker, another great band, or another great service. We need God's presence. That's the change that will literally change the world. I mean, God's presence is that. So as worship leaders, we have the unique opportunity to foster an environment where that happens, and that is real. I mean, that takes it from being in a movie theater to like, oh my goodness, now we're in God's presence. And just because they might be showing, you know, a Harrison Ford movie here in a couple hours, I'm feeling God's presence right now. I don't know why I went to Harrison Ford. He's probably like the least popular actor right now. I'm sorry, Harrison. But no, like we have such a unique opportunity, don't we, as worship leaders and worship pastors to bring God's presence wherever we go. I mean, you look at like one of my favorite verses in the Old Testament is Deuteronomy 10:8, and it hits these three things that was the mandate to the Levites back in that day. It was to carry the Ark of the Covenant wherever you go, to minister to the Lord, and to bless others in His name. And so if you're doing those three things as a worship leader, you're pastoring people. You're bringing God's presence wherever you go. You're ministering to the Lord, and you're blessing others in His name. Those are just three keys that we can take out of Deuteronomy 10. But yeah, the campus pastor, worship leader, that takes everything from just being a video on a screen to a community in real life, you know?
Yeah. Well, you can't carry the presence of God through video. That's got to be, you know, a real experience of the community gathered, and I love that. That's really the heart, the focus is, that's the transforming part, right? Not the video.
Exactly. And every campus has a prayer team, a hospitality team, a connection point team, kids ministry, production team. So through all those different teams, you're not only building community, but you're being the church. You're bringing the church to life, right? So.
Hey, we're winding down to about 5 minutes left, and before we land this plane, let's do now I'm going with this whole flying analogy, but let's do a flyover of your album. 5 songs, an EP. It looks like you had live versions and studio versions of all the songs. So tell us a little bit about the journey of putting this album together. It's not your first one, so it sounds like songwriting is a part of the culture and DNA that you're building at NCC. We've got a few lyrics of some of the songs, and maybe you could just, tell us about how they came about and that spirit of songwriting that you're developing in your teams at NCC.
Yeah, when I first came to NCC in 2010, we didn't do any music, we didn't write songs, and that was something that Pastor Mark really wanted to see happen, and it was close to my heart in Nashville. So coming here, it's been 5 years of that just growing into what we now have as the You Alone album. But we've done an album every year that usually stems out of the big series that our teaching team taught on that year. So the first album we did was God Anthology, and that came out of a nine-part series we did on the characteristics of God. Even the Thrill of Hope Christmas album that you referenced was out of a series we did in December 1 year called The Thrill of Hope. So But You Alone is actually really unique because it's not one album based off of a series. It's actually a collection of songs that came out of different series. So, songs like Majestic came out of our Psalm series. Song like Where Would I Be, that came out of a series we did on Grace. The song, what's another one off the record? Eternal One was also out of the Psalm series. Christ the Lord was out of a series we were doing in Easter, and then You Alone was actually kind of a unique moment. That song started at a worship night that we did, and Joel, who's not here, he just began to just really sing this chorus out of his spirit. You alone deserve my worship. You alone deserve my praise. And the congregation just took off with it. And so we left that night saying, okay, it would be bad songwriting stewardship to not do something with that chorus. And so every Friday we actually come together, our staff, and we have what we call Creative Fridays. And we write songs based out of messages or based out of our prayer time, our devotional times. And we actually open the doors to other worship leaders from other churches, other people on our teams who want to write. We don't make that an exclusive thing. And that's actually where the rest of You Alone was written, was out of that Creative Friday. We start off with an hour of prayer. And in that prayer time, God just began to give us these lyrics that ended up into that song. So the album is really what we hope a soundtrack to God's presence for whoever listens to it. We want people to encounter God through these songs. We did studio versions and live versions because we wanted to say, hey, no matter if you're a church that has no cap on your production budget and you've got, thousands of people every Sunday and you can do all these tracks and synths, that's awesome. But also for that church that maybe you've just got an acoustic guy and somebody on piano, we did those stripped down live versions to show you don't have to have the craziest production to pull these songs off, because at the end of the day it is about God's presence, and we want to see every church connecting to His presence through these songs. And so we've also done devotionals and song studies behind the music, videos on what these songs came out of, what scriptures they're birthed out of. We want this not to be just an album, but a resource to worship leaders. So that's our heart behind this whole thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just watching this morning the one video. You guys were sitting in front of a lake, no major microphones, or maybe it was in front of a river or something, and you had some little, I didn't know if it was a guitar or ukulele in your hand, but something small and acoustic and very unplugged and non-intimidating, this anybody can do these songs kind of thing. So I guess that is part of how you guys are expressing your heart of wanting to reach people and be accessible in your music, hey?
That's exactly it. I mean, it's great to write a cool song, but if it's not accessible to people coming from any different background or, church style, then, I always like to say a song, if you can play a song just on an acoustic guitar and it sounds just as great as when you have a full band version, then that's a great song. That's an accessible song, and that's what we try to do with this album.
That's great. Well, we're at the end of our hour, and often how I like to end our webinars is to actually give our guests, I'd like to invite you, if you would pray for us, all of us who've been listening in. We're in various ministries and churches. I'm sure some churches are struggling. They're not growing. They're trying to figure this out. They tried a multi-campus. It failed, all that kind of stuff. Most of all, maybe just praying that, God's presence would be the transforming thing and work its way into and through our lives and our gifts. And so I just want to invite you to do that, and we'll kind of bring closure to our time together with a little time of prayer. Is that all right?
Absolutely. And Ryan, anything that we didn't hit for everybody who's listening, please know it's our heart to always be a resource and to always be pouring out. So nccworship@theaterchurch.com. Shoot us an email. Check out the website, nccworship.net. We've got blogs up there and just things that we really do soak in prayer that would be an encouragement and a challenge and a resource to anyone who would come into contact with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I pray with you guys? Hey, Lord, thank you just for this time and opportunity to just hopefully be a blessing to your church. And God, just as I'm sitting here with Chris and Dan and Caleb in D.C., knowing that people from all around the world are listening, God, I just pray that your Holy Spirit would connect each and every one of us to just a greater vision to advance your kingdom and not any one of our own. God, that as we're walking through different challenges with our churches and multi-site, you know, what does that mean? God, we know that you have every answer, and that is found in your presence. So, God, don't draw us to, you know, more self-help books and more ideas, but just draw us to your presence, God, because that's where we can find every answer. That's where we can find life and life to the fullest, God. And so I just pray for every worship pastor that's listening. I pray for every worship team member that's listening, every lead pastor. God, I just pray that you would just give them one great download from this, one great thought from your heart. Let it not be our words that people are hearing, but your Holy Spirit's words through us, God. Thank you for just a worshiping church, God, that we have places that we can go to like this where people are just passionate about seeing your name lifted high. And seeing your church rise to be the bride that we were meant to be. God, we love you. We honor you. And Jesus, thank you so much for the call that you placed on our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Amen. Well, you guys have really poured it out today. Thank you so much. You came very prepared to give and to give us real meat to kind of dig into, and your heart totally comes through. Appreciate that you're a real team builder, Kurtis, and Dan and Chris, thanks for joining us as well. We appreciate having your guys' music in praise charts. We have all the charts and chord charts and tracks and things like that. And we have a great relationship with Integrity Music. Thanks to Integrity for helping bring this all together with you guys. So the Lord bless you in your continued ministry.
Hey, blessings to you, man. Thank you for facilitating this.
Awesome. And this webinar has all been recorded. It will be live on our blog probably by this afternoon or tomorrow, so you feel free to listen again or share it with some friends. And it will just stay there forever. Till Jesus comes back, people will be listening to this webinar. So there you go.
That's awesome, man. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bless you. Have a great day out in Washington, D.C. You've really given us some great things to go with today. Awesome.
Love it, man. Hey, we'd love to come back and do it another time. I feel like those hours go by so quick. So
I know. Yeah.
Just always something to talk about.
Sometimes I feel hugely intimidated if I have to give a 20-minute sermon, but I can do an hour-long webinar, no problem, because it just is conversation, right? So you guys are very easy to talk to. Thanks very much.
Thank you, man.